I am a proud new partner of Car Marshal. If you are interested in a new or used car, please click on the link in my description box below. No credit check, no cosigner. That's Car Marshal.
Absolutely believed that it was impossible, physically impossible, I should say divinely impossible, for a white person to go to Mecca. And my trip there shattered that image, or that misconcept.
Anyone call you directly, Malcolm?
I've been receiving calls ever since I left the Black Muslim movement.
And what sort of calls, Malcolm? You're disenchanted in view of the fact that these men who were your brothers are making threats against your life?
No, because actually it's not their fault. Most of them, now Joseph and the officials, they have a knowledge of what it's all about. But the rank and file Muslim brother does not know what it's all about. They are, out of religious sincerity, they think that they are doing the will of Allah by protecting a man who I myself taught them was divine. So I don't in any way fault them. But those who are over them and give the orders, and actually the ultimate order comes from Elijah Muhammad himself. As long as I represented the Black Muslim movement as an example of morality, unity, and militancy, as long as I could do that, I represented it. It was when I realized that it could not be represented as that I came on and started working among the non-Muslim Negroes, as I announced in January, and I had no intention, or rather March, and I had no intention of ever even speaking on this. Had they left me alone, you still wouldn't know what really took place.
Why are they threatening your life?
Well, primarily because they're afraid that I will tell the real reason that that I'm out of the Black Muslim movement, which I never told. I kept to myself. But the real reason is that Elijah Muhammad, the head of the movement, is the father of 8 children by 6 different teenage girls, 6 different teenage girls who were his private personal secretary. The one who first made me aware of this was Wallace Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad's son. And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, that's moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the national secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
What steps
will you take to protect yourself from this threat?
I take no steps. I have a rifle. If anybody comes to my house without a good reason, I intend to try and use it, and that's all.
Right now?
No, I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Hakeem Jamal was born Alan Donaldson in Roxbury, Boston in 1931. Hakeem was a former alcoholic and drug addict. After serving time in prison and a mental asylum for attempted murder, Hakeem Jamal converted to Islam and to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. In January of 1965, Malcolm was hopping on a flight to meet with some women who were allegedly impregnated by Elijah Muhammad. Hakeem Jamal was waiting on Malcolm at the airport, and he noticed a familiar face. The man he recognized was the National Secretary of the Nation of Islam, a man by the name of John Ali. Then all of a sudden, the NOI flooded the airport. Now check this out. I get this question all the time about proof. People are always asking me about proof that the Nation of Islam killed Malcolm. I can't prove that. Nobody can. I admitted that on the War on Malcolm Part 1. Make sure you go back and check out Part 1. I can't prove it, but there was a lot of suspect things that happened around that time. Now, do I think the NOI killed him or had something to do with it? Absolutely. Do I think the orders came from Elijah Muhammad himself? I don't know. I hope I'm wrong about this. I've always hoped I was wrong about this. Certain things just doesn't add up. There's so many situations where you never get answers to. Never. I still listen to Farrakhan. I still go back and read up on Elijah Muhammad. One of my favorite books of all time is The Message to the Black Man. That book is on the cover of this very channel. I don't hate the NOI. I don't hate Farrakhan. I don't hate Elijah Muhammad. But certain things just doesn't add up. Now, I would highly recommend all black men to read Message to the Black Man. But let's hear what Malcolm had to say about his trip to LA.
Tried to kill me in Los Angeles airport while I was in the company of the Los Angeles police. The Los Angeles police stopped the TWA Airlines from taking off. They slipped me into a private room onto the plane through the basement because of the presence of these persons in the airport who were completely heedless of the presence of the police. Now, this airliner was held up an hour and a half. Every passenger aboard it was taken off. His luggage was searched. I was kept on the plane. My luggage was searched. And then the TWA Airlines security agent flew to Chicago from Los Angeles with me. I was met at the airport in Chicago by the Assistant Attorney General of the state of Illinois and at least 20 different detectives. I was held in their custody for 24 hours. I appeared on the Cupsonet show. When I came out of the studio, officials of the Black Muslim movement in Chicago even tried to attack the police to get at me. Police department from coast to coast in this country have the Black Muslim movement well infiltrated, just as they have any other group well infiltrated. They are well aware of these plots and discussions that take place.
See, Malcolm was naming names. Hakeem Jamal was naming names. A man named Leon X. Amir was naming names. Malcolm recognized these people by face and he was naming names. How can you argue against that? The only how to argue against that is to say he was lying. But why would he lie? There's tons of books, there's tons of audio, and there's tons of audios with visual where you can hear and see Malcolm name these people by name. I mentioned more on War on Malcolm Part 1. So, with all this going on, and Malcolm naming these people by name that he recognized, all the attempts on his life, when he gets killed...
Elijah Muhammad Jr. come to New York when Elijah Muhammad was at the Armory in June of last year. Junior stood up and told the Fruit, many of whom are here now also, that I should have been killed, that my tongue should have been put in an envelope and sent back to Chicago by now. And then Clarence, the captain from Boston, and John, the captain from Springfield, came to New York to assassinate me.
We're not supposed to think that the nation did it? Let's talk about the NOI newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, the December 4th issue of 1964. And let's take a look at Malcolm's head bouncing around in the illustration. And through the illustration, they're saying how they're going to blow him away. And what about Farrakhan's words in this very article right here? This is public information. You don't have to go get a book to find this. You don't have to have the original newspaper. You can Google this and you can download it right now and read the entire article for yourself. Go download it. Farrakhan's words, and I quote, "The die is set, and Malcolm shall not escape." The die is set, and Malcolm shall not escape. Or what about the audio of Farrakhan praising Malcolm's killers? Farrakhan calling Malcolm's killers fearless men.
Personally ordered attacks upon you?
Oh, yes. This brother was the captain. He was one of the karate experts who taught karate on the entire East Coast, Eastern region. And he was in the inner circle.
and he pointed out that in October, he didn't cease being a captain, but his influence or authority was placed beneath that of Clarence, the captain who's in Boston. Clarence was put over Joseph, and shortly after that, as Leon Amir testified, Clarence, the captain from Boston, and John, the captain from Springfield, Massachusetts, came to New York to carry out this so-called assassination. And they came to Leon looking for a silencer for their gun. Well, see, I understand all of it, but they parked half a block from my house here in the home of Alvin, who's also one of Elijah Muhammad's men, looking for a chance when they could, make their move. But thanks to Allah.
These are Farrakhan's words. You can hear him in the audio. Or what about Farrakhan talking about the response the messenger had on questions on Malcolm? The question was, did you Muslims kill Malcolm? And the response was, so what if I did? So what if I did? Now let me say this. Please understand this. If someone kills my brother, and I go ask the suspect, did you kill my brother? I ask the suspect, did you kill my brother? And he responds, so what if I did? Wow. Or what about Farrakhan saying the nation should be able to deal with its own traitors? Or what about Leon X. Amir, who was a strong follower of Malcolm X? What about Leon X. Amir, who spoke out on Elijah Muhammad? Leon X. Amir was beat almost to death by Clarence X. Gill and other members of the NOI. Clarence X. Gill, who was the former bodyguard of heavyweight champ Muhammad Ali. So, they almost killed this brother, and he started naming names. Once again, he's naming names. Hakeem Jamal was naming names. Malcolm was naming names. Just months after Malcolm's assassination, Leon X. Amir was murdered. So again, a lot of suspect things happened around that time. Certain dots are just easy to connect, but I hope the NOI didn't have anything to do with it. I really do. I hope they didn't. The NOI, they get on these radio shows, these podcasts, they have interviews, and nobody asks these tough questions. Nobody asks about Hakeem Jamal, about Leon X. Amir, about the other attempts on Malcolm's life. How come nobody asks these questions? Every time they go public, people want to throw them underhand softball pitches. I mean, underhand softball pitches. Nobody want to ask the tough questions. Nobody want to speak about the things Malcolm was saying, the faces Malcolm was recognizing, the names Malcolm was telling. Nobody speaks on that. We would probably never have proof on who killed Malcolm. We would probably never have proof.
They say you did it. When they bomb the synagogue, they say the Jews bombed their own synagogue. This is the Klan tactic. And tonight, I'll tell you why the black Muslim movement is now adopting the same tactics against black people as has been up to now the exclusive method of the Ku Klux Klan. I want to point out, too, that I'm not talking about Muslims just to make white people happy, because I don't believe in letting anyone use me against somebody else. I'm telling you these things because it has reached a point where I feel that black people in this country need to know what's going on. And I'm talking about an organization which I had a hand in building, which I had a hand in organizing. I know its characteristics. I know its potential. I know its behavior pattern. I know what it can do and what it cannot do. And one of the things it can do is bomb your house.
Correct. Fornication was worthy of expulsion.
But in 1963, Malcolm X learned that Elijah Muhammad himself had repeatedly committed adultery with some of his teenage secretaries and had children with them. Malcolm agonized over his discovery, and in June of 1964, he told me about it. And he called some of these women who were living in Los Angeles at the time and let me listen to the conversation. And it became apparent that he was telling the truth. He told you about that, yes?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, Malcolm was aware of other tensions growing within the Nation of Islam, for his popularity had begun to surpass that of Elijah Muhammad.
There was a dynamic inside of the nation that troubled Brother Malcolm at the highest echelon of leadership.
Well, the fact of the
There
matter...
was envy. Okay. There was envy.
Envy of Malcolm.
Of Malcolm.
By
there
you?
Was, no, never by me.
Never by you?
Never by me. Never. I truly loved this man.
Who envied him?
There are those in the circle who feared the kind of publicity that he was getting, the kind of attention that he was getting. He was the most vocal. He was the most loved. He was the most honored and respected.
And he outshone the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
In certain areas, yes.
In 1964, Malcolm X broke with the Nation of Islam to form his own organization based on orthodox Muslim principles, which include a respect for all races and religions. And how did Louis Farrakhan react? He began writing incendiary editorials in the Nation of Islam's newspaper. Let me read you what you wrote in December of 1964. The die is set, and Malcolm shall not escape, especially after such evil, foolish talk about his benefactor, Elijah Muhammad, in trying to rob him of the divine glory which Allah has bestowed upon him. Such a man as Malcolm is worthy of death. This was only 2 months before he was shot down. That is why people believe that you were responsible for the death of Malcolm X.
No, not at all. My name was not among those at that time who were considered the players.
Nonetheless, following those editorials, Malcolm and his family received numerous death threats from whom no one knows for sure.
Are you not, perhaps, afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
But Farrakhan says that Elijah Muhammad had issued a warning to his followers.
Leave Minister Malcolm alone. Those were orders. Those were instructions to us. Leave this man alone.
But in February of 1965, while the family was asleep, Malcolm's home in New York was firebombed. And just 1 week later, 39-year-old Malcolm X was gunned down by members of the Nation of Islam. But there are those who still believe the government had a hand in Malcolm's death. Fact is, for years, the FBI and the New York City police had Malcolm X under surveillance. Just 7 years ago, he was still charging that Malcolm had deserved punishment.
And if we've dealt with him like a nation deals with a traitor, what the hell business is it of yours?
But now Louis Farrakhan, recuperating from prostate cancer and facing his own mortality, has a different appreciation of Malcolm X, and he wanted Adil Shabazz to know it. He did most of the talking during our 4-hour meeting. Finally, Shabazz could no longer hold back 35 years of anguish.
Indeed, the FBI probably had something to do with it. But we have to say that adult men between the ages of 20 and 40, black faces, who chose to put a trigger in their hands and unload until it was empty, have to be culpable. You can't keep pointing the finger because my father was not killed from a grassy knoll. And I have sisters who are spun out into this environment as tumbleweed, unhealed. We knew to stay silent because as a child, I thought it could happen to me. That if I spoke up or said something, they'd take my mother, they'd take one of us. I got to hear reports of the traitor deserved it, so it never could go away. Those reports didn't come from the government. Those reports did not come from the police. They came from the tan and brown and black faces that once claimed themselves as family members.